He is the Monday morning quarterback, kind enough to join us on a Tuesday morning. Albert Breer, who had the best day yesterday. Albert?
Oh, hey, Dan. I love what the Chiefs did. I think, like if you look at kind of where they were going into the day, they needed to fill running back, they needed to fill nose tackle. They get both those addressed. The reason I really like the Kenneth Walker deal, I go back a couple of years, and I remember, when Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Saquon Barkley did deals on the first day of free agency. And there were a lot of people like, I can't believe teams are spending on running backs, all of that stuff. And I remember taking a step back and thinking to myself, well, look at the three teams that did it. It was the Eagles, the Packers, and the Ravens. And those aren't dumb teams. And so, my thought on it at the time was, have we gotten to the point now where teams are looking at and saying that position has been devalued to the point where it's become a value, right? And so then I dug into it a little deeper, talked to those teams. It was pointed out to me that Darnell Mooney got signed by the Falcons for about the same at about the same rate that Barkley, Jacobs, and Henry got, which was insane to me, when you think about the value of those players. So I think that the top end veteran running back who makes it to the free agent market has become a value. And so the Chiefs get that. And Kenneth Walker, a guy who can play on all three downs, had 133 catches over his 4 years in Seattle. Something they really haven't had in a long time in Kansas City. They get Kyrus Tonga to fill their nose tackle role. They get Alohi Gilman to play safety for him. I think Tonga and Gilman, two guys that switched teams last year, are ascending now. So they get those guys, I think, on the way up. And I think the other thing it does, Dan, to me, that's really important. This is going to be a big draft for the Chiefs after the Trent McDuffie trade. And I don't think if you're the Chiefs, you can count on Jeremiah Love falling to you at 9. So by getting Walker, it really frees them up to just go get the best player with the ninth pick and not have to trade up. And they have the 9th, 29th, and 40th picks. So if they want, they can go in and maybe get a Travis Kelce successor in Kenyon Sadiq. They can go in and get a receiver, like maybe a Carnell Tate falls to them. They can go get a corner like Delane from LSU. You just look at all the different things that they could do now in the draft, and getting Kenneth Walker opens a lot of that up for them. So I really like what the Chiefs did all the way around, and I think it sets them up to have a really great draft and have a different looking team around Patrick Mahomes when he gets back off the ACL.
I'm guessing the Chiefs did their due diligence, realizing that Jeremiah Love was not going to be there, and
Yeah.
they had to upgrade. So that means Titans, Giants. Does Arizona entertain the idea of Jeremiah Love that high?
So I think for all those teams, the question you got to ask is like, how quickly are we going to get really, really good, right? Like, so the thing about taking a running back that high is that like their rookie deal, like that's going to be a part of their prime because it's easier to plug guys in at that position and you can produce almost right away. And so, I think for Arizona, for the Giants, for the Titans, what it's going to take is a real sober look at your roster and saying to yourself, are we in a position to do this rather than, taking a tackle or a pass rusher or someone in a premium position? And I think that's sort of indicative of the overall makeup of the top 10. I made this comparison a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's an interesting one. Do you remember the Lions in 2023, what they did when they took Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell in the first round, right? Do you remember how they were criticized for that, Dan? A running
Yeah.
back and an off-ball linebacker?
Yeah.
Well, now 3 years later, Jack Campbell's first team All-Pro and Gibbs has made 3 Pro Bowls, right? And so, and if you look at the guys who went at premium positions around them, I mean, I picked out 12 or 13 guys that were picked right around there, and only Christian Gonzalez and Jackson Smith and Jigba are the same level or better than the two guys the Lions got. The reason I'm saying that is because, I think that's going to be a question a lot of teams are going to have to ask is like, do we take a premium position, a corner, an edge rusher, a tackle, in the top, call it 12 picks? Or do we go with an off-ball linebacker in Sonny Styles or a running back in Jeremiah Love or a safety in Caleb Downs? That's sort of the makeup of the top end of the draft because you don't have a Myles Garrett type of edge rusher. You don't have a Joe Alt type of tackle. You're going to have to compromise some. And so it does make for an interesting decision. But I think for the teams you mentioned, the important thing is going to be, are we ready to take a running back and plug him in and maybe pass up on somebody who could fill a hole at a premium spot?
Yeah, Commanders might be the landing spot for Jeremiah Love. We're talking to Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. I like that the Raiders spent money. I like that they went out and they overspent for a center, but I got to have the first line of defense for my quarterback. I got to start with my center, who is a high-end center. I like that, and then they kind of filled in with maybe players that we're not too familiar with, but they will serve a purpose there. The Raiders spent money. Did they spend it wisely?
So they overspent on Tyler Linderbaum, but I think it was actually a good overspend. Here's the way I look at it. Like, I think center is probably a more important position than guard, and especially in that offense. So, like, Trey Smith and Tyler Smith are at the top of the guard market right now, right around 24 million. So, like, let's say the value for Tyler Linderbaum was 23 or 24 million. Would you rather just spend the 3 million extra and get the player than risk losing him to the Commanders or the Browns or whoever was in it if you're the Raiders? Like, 3 million isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. And if you've got to overpay because you haven't been winning, then go ahead and do it, right? And what you get, to me, when you look at this is a guy who's a great scheme fit. He's a smaller guy for the position, but that doesn't matter as much in the Kubiak offense. He's athletic, he can pull. So all of that's in place. And then in that offense, they put a lot mentally on the center, right? The center is a huge part of the pre-snap operation when it comes to setting protections and all of that stuff. That takes stuff off the plate of the quarterback. So that's going to take stuff off the plate of Fernando Mendoza. So by investing in Linderbaum, I think you're investing in Mendoza. So that's why I like that move. I think it's a scheme fit and it helps you with your young quarterback. And then, as far as the other things they did, I think they took advantage of a depressed market for off-ball linebackers and going and getting Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean. They're taking a flyer on a former first-round pick in Kwity Paye. They're bringing back Eric Stokes, who I think flashed again as a former first-rounder at corner. I think, when you get past Linderbaum, I think you see a lot of sensible mid-level moves. They're not at the top of the market, but I think they're moves that could make them better, in the short term and the long term. So I like where the Raiders spent their money yesterday.
Trying to understand the Dolphins. I wasn't surprised Malik Willis went there, but I was surprised that why not just let this season play out? Why not have Quinn Ewers play? You're not winning anything, so you're going to give away one of Malik Willis's, 1 year out of 3 years. It's not a lot of money, and I do like him.
Yeah.
Why not just ride this out? You're not going to be good. Once again, it's supposed to be a good quarterback draft next year. Why not be in the mix for somebody who is truly a franchise quarterback?
I'm with you on all of that. Like, this is very clearly a rebuilding year, like a tear it down to the studs year for them, right? Like, no question about it. I think it's a credibility play is the way I would look at it. Look, like, I don't think there's any question that they're not going to be great this year. And, I think, over the course of the next few weeks, the next couple months, you're going to see the Dolphins really put a lot of eggs in the basket of the draft. And that's been the charge of ownership, when they were going out and looking for a new GM and looking for a new head coach. A huge part of it was what we need to draft and develop better. And that's why they go and get a couple guys from the Packers and John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley, because that place has been a player development machine over the years. And so I'm with you on, like, they need to draft better. They had fewer draft picks than any team in the league over the last 4 years. A couple of their draft classes out of the last 5 have been complete wastelands. They need to fix that, and they're going to try and fix that this offseason. At the same time, you can't be the Cleveland Indians from major league. You know what I mean? Like, if you're trying to build a program. And so I do think, like, bringing in Malik Willis from Green Bay, John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley know exactly what they're getting with him. at least gives you some credibility that, for the players who are on hand, we are going to give you a chance on a week to week basis. And, maybe we don't have Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes here, but we do have a guy that we can game plan with and a guy that we can compete with. And so, just as far as like getting buy-in from the players and energizing the team this year, I think Malik Willis does that. And, I view him as sort of a high-end bridge to whoever the next guy is. And maybe it's somebody like an Arch Manning or a Brendan Sorsby or a CJ Carr or a Trinidad Chambliss, whoever it is next year.
Kyler Murray seems like a foregone conclusion. He's going to Minnesota. Is that correct?
I think he'd like to go to Minnesota. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fair guess.
But if not Minnesota, then where?
Indianapolis. Here's the thing: if you're Kyler Murray, because you're going to play on the minimum next year, right? So money is not an object. The Cardinals are basically paying you next year. So the reason Kyler Murray wanted to be cut rather than traded is because he wanted to be able to pick his next destination for football reasons only, right? So if you're Kyler Murray, is your best play to go to the Jets, or is your best play to go to the Colts if it's not the Vikings, right? If you go to the Colts, you get to play for Shane Steichen. You'll get all the starter reps through the spring and summer. Maybe Daniel Jones is ready for the opener, but if he gets hurt again, then you get in and you'll have some familiarity with the players there. And they've got good offensive players and guys like Pierce and Warren and not Pittman anymore, but Jonathan Taylor, good offensive line. So I think those are the things you have to weigh, right? Like if you're Kyler Murray, Minnesota obviously would be perfect. And I can tell you this, like Kevin O'Connell has looked at these sorts of reclamation projects over the last couple of months in anticipation of being here. And they had such success resurrecting Sam Darnold's career a couple of years ago that they're really interested in doing that with someone again. So my guess would be like where your guess is, that he winds up with the Minnesota Vikings. But I think Geno Smith could wind up being a factor there too. It'll be interesting to see how all of it plays out.
I bring up Jerry Jones not to troll anybody here, but he's the one who was all in last year, and then he's going to bust the budget this year. What are they waiting on? Because I think they were in the Max Crosby sweepstakes.
They were. They were in it till the end, yeah.
Okay.
What
are they waiting for?
I would say one name to keep an eye on for them would be Trey Hendrickson, especially if the market comes down a little bit like it seems to have. They did address the edge rusher question, which is the biggest question for them coming into this offseason, in going and trading for Rashawn Gary. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're not necessarily done there yet. They've got a young player they really like in Donovan Ezeraku, who was a rookie last year. So I think you could wind up seeing an addition there. They've obviously got the money tied up in George Pickens on the franchise tag. They paid Javonte Williams, and they did make the run at Max Crosby. I could also see them doing something at corner here in the next day or two. So I don't think they're done, but they did make a move right before the start of free agency and trading for Gary. And I think Rashawn Gary's better than some of the edge rushers that went out that got paid out there on the market. And if they wind up with both Gary and Hendrickson, well, now you're talking about kind of reimagining who you are on the defensive front, especially if a guy like Ezeraku can take another step. So free agency is not over yet. We're not even 24 hours in. So I think the Cowboys defense is going to look significantly different by the time we get to the beginning of May, when the draft is over, and maybe we'll see another move or two as part of that in the next day or two.
Good to talk to you as always. Know you're busy. Thank you, Albert.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
That's Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. Yeah, I misspoke on Rashawn Gary, talking about him being a guy who's going to stop the run. He's obviously an edge rusher, so that's E-me.